The gatehouse telephone at the Queen's Gate is a black, ugly thing bolted to the wall at shoulder height, and in 19 years of keeping the palace motor court I had seen it lifted for exactly 3 purposes: a jammed barrier, a fainting sightseer, and a delivery lorry that came with the wrong papers. 3 purposes. 19 years. I had never once seen a man pick it up to call security on the Queen. It was 6 on a Thursday morning in the wet end of autumn, and I was standing under the arch of the motor court with the movement book under my arm, because that is where I stand at that hour, and that is what I carry. My name is Osric Penhale. I was a guardsman 11 years, and I have been keeper of the motor court for 19 more, which means every wheel that enters this palace and every wheel that leaves it passes through my book, and that I know the sound of every engine in the royal yard the way a shepherd knows his own dogs barking in the dark. The engine idling at the Queen's Gate that morning was not one I expected, and not one that should have been there, and that is where all of it begins. It was a Harlow estate car, mud green, long in the body, a dent in the near rear wing that had been there since before the boy who dented it was old enough to shave. 16 years old and heavy as a barge. Under the palace it had a name, though nobody had said it aloud in that yard for years: the Beast. It had been the late Queen Isolde's own car, not a state car, not a car with a chauffeur and a flag on the wing, but the one she drove herself, badly, along the Thornhillow lanes with the windows down and mud on the sills. Isolde had been dead 9 years. The Harlow had gone on living, and lately it had been living a life I did not much like the look of. At the wheel that morning sat Lord Cassius, dark coat, no tie, a man of 34 who had never in his life had to explain himself to anybody in a uniform. In the back, behind glass that had been rained on and not washed, sat the Queen Consort Morwenna, upright, gloved, entirely composed, in the gray light of 6 in the morning, as though 6 in the morning had asked her permission to arrive. And in the road in front of the bonnet, hands at his sides, chin level, stood Lance Sergeant Halden Rooke of the Queen's Gate Detachment. I want to be exact about this, because a great many people afterwards told the story badly, and the exactness is the whole of it. Rooke was not blocking the car. He was standing where a man stands when he means to be seen and does not mean to be a wall. The barrier was down, which is its resting state. The barrier is always down until somebody writes something in a book. Half a pace behind him, looking as if his own boots had betrayed him, stood Guardsman Ivo Pell, 22 years old, 4 months on that gate, white to the lips. I came out from under the arch with the book because I heard that engine, and my body knew before my head did that it was wrong. 2 things were wrong. First, that car was inside the wall at 6 in the morning wanting out, and it had not come in through any gate that put it in my book. It had gone somewhere in the night and returned by a way that left no line anywhere. Second, the seals. You must understand what a seal is here, or none of this will land. When a case or a crate or a bag leaves the palace, it is closed with a numbered crown seal, a small tab of light gray plastic, stamped, threaded, broken only once, and the number goes in the movement book against the vehicle, the driver, the destination, the hour. It is a stupid, stubborn, 900-year-old system that was clever once and has simply refused to die, and the whole of its stubborn genius is this. A thing that leaves has a number, the number is written down, and anybody may afterwards look at it. There were 2 flight cases in the back of the Harlow that morning, strapped flat where the boys' kit bags used to go. Both were sealed, and the seals, I saw this myself, from 20 feet in bad light, and I would say it under oath in any court in the realm, were from the wrong book. Palace seals that year ran from 41. These began 39. A 39 seal was 2 years dead, rolls of them lying in some drawer that nobody had ever bothered to burn. Rooke had seen it first, of course he had. A man who stands still for 6 years sees more than a man who walks about. Ma'am, not loud. He had a voice like a closing door, quiet and final. I can't pass the seals. Cassius put his elbow out of the window. You can't what? The seals on the cases are out of series, my lord. I need the movement docket, and I need to log the numbers, and then the gate opens. It's the Queen's car. It's the Queen in the back of it. Yes, my lord. Cassius laughed, the way men laugh when they have never yet met a door that did not open. Then, what in the name of the crown are we discussing? The docket, said Rooke. I have turned that morning over for a long time, and I have decided that what happened next happened because Morwenna made a mistake. She was a woman of enormous patient cunning. I saw her work for years and never once caught her at it, and she made exactly one mistake in front of me in all that time. She should have produced a docket, any docket, a scrap of paper with a scrawl on it. Rooke would have written the numbers, the barrier would have gone up, the Harlow would have taken its cases wherever the cases were going, and I would have made my entry and gone in for my tea. Instead, the rear window came down, and she looked at him. Guardsman, she said, open the gate. Not angry. That is what people always get wrong when they tell it. She was never angry, not that morning, not until much later. She was reasonable. She said it as you would say it to a man holding a door for you, when you have your hands full, and you would like him to hurry. Rooke looked back at her. Not at her eyes, a guardsman does not stare down a queen, whatever else he does, but at the air a hand's breadth above her shoulder, which is a discipline they teach you, and which lets a man be respectful and immovable at the same time. Ma'am, he said, with respect I need the docket. There is no docket, she said. There is me. Pell made a small noise. Even Cassius stopped smiling, because a thing had come into the morning that had not been there a minute earlier, and everyone could feel it, the way you feel a floor give an inch under your foot. And here is the part I did not expect. Rooke did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not say, Madam, I am within my rights. He did none of the small, stupid, brave things a man does when he wants to be seen being brave. He said, Ma'am, then I have to place the vehicle on hold. He turned and walked 11 paces to the gatehouse door. I counted them afterwards, out of some idiot need to have a number for the thing. And through the wired glass I watched him take that black, ugly telephone off the wall. I could not hear him. I did not need to. There are 4 buttons on that telephone, and everyone in the household knows what the second one does. He pressed it, said something short, put the receiver back, came out, and stood exactly where he had been standing before, hands at his sides, chin level. The Queen Consort of Eldermore looked at him through an open car window and understood, I think, better than anybody else in that yard, precisely what he had just done. You called security, she said. Yes, ma'am. On me. On the vehicle, ma'am, a beat. You're inside it. I have thought 100 times about the next 30 seconds. I was 10 paces away with the movement book under my arm and 19 years of authority in that yard, and if I had walked forward then and said what I knew, everything that came after would have come faster and cost less. I did not walk forward. I stood under the arch like a coat on a hook and told myself it was not my gate. That is my part in this, and I will not dress it. The security detail came at a run from the Silver Court, 4 of them, and behind them, walking, buttoning his coat as he came, Chief Superintendent Merrick Dunn, who commands the palace's civil security and who had, I would guess, been 3 minutes into his first cup of the day. Dunn is a heavy, careful man with a gray mustache and the permanently affronted expression of somebody who has spent his life being told things too late. He arrived at the Harlow's bonnet, saw who was in the back of it, and I watched his face perform a whole silent tragedy in about a second and a half. Sergeant, he said, in the voice of a man testing a rope bridge, who called this in? I did, sir. You did. Vehicle hold at the Queen's gate. Seals out of series, no docket, no authority to move. Rooke recited it flat, the way you recite a thing you have practiced in your head and never once expected to say. I've requested the duty officer and the controller." Dunn's eyes went to the rear window, and to Morwenna, and away again very fast. "Ma'am, I'm sure this is." "It is nothing. It is a young man who has misread a number. It's early. He's cold. I have no wish to end anybody's career before breakfast." She let a small silence sit there so everybody could hear the shape of the thing she was not saying. "Lift the barrier, Superintendent. I am expected." And Dunn, I will give him this, and it cost him more than people know, said, "Ma'am, the standing order is the standing order. A vehicle on hold does not leave until it is cleared. I can clear it in 10 minutes. "Then clear it in 10 minutes, said Cassius, "and we'll all pretend this was weather." Nobody moved, because the thing that had to happen next was that somebody had to write in a book, and the only book in that yard was under my arm. "Osric," said Dunn, "bring it here." I brought it. God forgive me, I brought it slowly. He ran his finger back through the previous evening, and the previous day, and the week, and I watched him not find what he was looking for, and watched him not understand yet why he wasn't finding it. "There's no out entry for this car." "No, sir." "Then it never left." "Not in the book, sir." "But it left." "It's warm," said Rooke from the road, not turning his head. "The bonnet is warm, sir. It's been driven this morning, or driven late enough last night that it hasn't gone cold. It's not a car that slept here." Dunn put his palm flat on the Harlow's bonnet the way a man checks a horse, and left it there a second too long, and took it off and wiped it on his coat, and something in the set of his shoulders changed, and did not change back for 3 days. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle." That was the moment. It was not the telephone call. The telephone call was the deed. The moment was this: a superintendent of household security saying 11 ordinary words to a Queen Consort in a wet yard at 6 in the morning, and the whole architecture of the last 9 years beginning, very slightly, to lean. She did not shout. She got out. She stood on the cobbles with the rain starting again and pulled her gloves straight, one finger at a time, and looked at Halden Rooke the way a surveyor looks at a wall he intends to have taken down. "What is your name, guardsman?" "Rooke, ma'am, Lance Sergeant." "Rooke," she said, tasting it. "And do you know what you have done this morning, Lance Sergeant Rooke?" And Rooke said, and I heard this, and Pell heard it, and Dunn heard it, and it went round the palace by lunchtime, and round the realm by the end of the month. "Yes, ma'am, I've done my post." She smiled at him. It was the worst thing I saw that day, worse than anything that came after that small courteous smile. Then she turned and she walked back through the Queen's Gate arch into the palace, unhurried, and she left the car standing in the rain with its 2 sealed cases and its warm bonnet and its dead woman's dent in the wing. And I remember thinking, with the flat certainty of a man watching a wave come in, she has just left the only thing in the world she should not have left. She did not know that yet. Neither did I, neither did anyone. The Harlow stood in the yard with 4 security men round it and the barrier down, and Halden Rooke stood in the road with his hands at his sides. And at 11 minutes past 6, the second telephone call of the morning came down from the Comptroller's office, and the pleasant, tired, reasonable voice of Lord Baron Quayle asked Chief Superintendent Dunn what precisely he imagined he was doing, and instructed him, as Comptroller of the household, with the authority of the household in the King's name, to lift the barrier, release the vehicle, and take the sergeant's warrant card off him before he had time to do anything else clever. They released nothing, but they took the card. Dunn did it himself. He would not send another man. He stood in front of Rooke with the rain coming harder and held out his hand. "Sergeant, warrant card. You're stood down pending inquiry. That is not my choice, and I am not pretending it is." Rooke unbuttoned the breast pocket of his tunic, took out the card, put it in Dunn's palm, and said, "Sir." That was all, sir. 1 syllable, and the 6 years on that gate, and his father's name, and his pension, and his lodging, and whatever life he had imagined for himself went into another man's hand in the rain. Pell was crying. 22 years old, 4 months on the gate, standing at attention with the tears running down his face, and his jaw locked so hard I could see the muscle jumping. I stood under the arch with my book. And behind us all, unattended, unregarded, forgotten by every single person in that courtyard, including the woman who owned its secrets, the late Queen Isolde's mud-green Harlow estate car sat in the rain with its doors unlocked and its glove box shut. Lord Baron Quayle came down to the motor court at 20 to 7 with an umbrella and a folder, the way a man comes down to sort out a broken window, mildly irritated, wholly confident, already thinking about the rest of his day. He was 58, silver, well-tailored, and universally liked, which I have since learned is a thing worth being suspicious of. As controller of the household, he held the strings of every office in the palace that touched money, the estates, the stipends, the pensions, the charitable trusts. He had held them 11 years. He had held them, in fact, since about a year after Queen Isolde died, which is one of those facts that means nothing until suddenly it means everything. Superintendent, Osric, Sergeant. He gave each of us a nod exactly proportionate to our rank, which was very much his way. Let's be quick and let's be sensible. Open the cases. Dunn blinked, my lord. Open them, break the seals, tip them out, look at the contents, and let us all get on with our lives. Quayle smiled round at us like a schoolmaster being a good sport about a prank. The sergeant thinks there's something in those cases. Very well, we shall look in the cases. And when there is nothing in the cases, we shall agree that a diligent young man had a diligent morning, and I shall see it goes no further than a note in his file. That is generous, Superintendent. I want it recorded that it is generous. He is too eager, I thought. And then, no, he is not eager. He is *relieved*. I did not understand why until much later. They set the cases on the trestle out of the rain, and Dunn cut the first seal himself with a folding knife and read the number aloud for the book, and I wrote it down, 391140, 2 years out of series. Quayle did not so much as glance at it. The first case held linen, bed linen, table linen, interleaved with tissue, monogrammed, old and beautiful, the sort of thing that gets wrapped and moved and wrapped again and never used. The second held papers. Not documents, papers. Letters in boxes, household inventories 30 years old, photograph albums with the corners going soft, a pressed flower falling out of one onto the cobbles where the rain took it. Estate effects, said Quayle pleasantly, from Thornhallow going back to Thornhallow. Her Majesty is emptying 2 rooms and she is doing it herself, because the last time she let the household do it they lost a chair. He closed the case with 2 fingers. The seals are the wrong series because somebody in stores has been handing out an old roll. That is a matter for stores, and I will deal with stores, and it will be the dullest afternoon of my life. He turned to Rooke. Sergeant, you have stopped a car containing tablecloths. Not one man in that yard laughed, but I felt the air go out of it, the way it goes out of a room when a doctor says a word you were not expecting. And I watched Halden Rooke absorb the fact that he had spent his career and would very likely never get it back. He did not move. The car still isn't in the book, my lord. The car is a family car. The car is inside the wall, my lord. Everything inside the wall is in the book. Quayle's pleasantness slipped for the first time. Half an inch, you could have missed it. Do you know what you sound like? Yes, my lord, said Rooke. That was the end of the argument. Quayle went back up the steps under his umbrella with his folder, and I stood with the rain running off the arch, and I thought, he never asked about the glove box. He never asked what was in the *car*. He asked what was in the cases, and he opened the cases, and he made a great performance of opening the cases. And not once in 17 minutes did that clever, careful, 11-year controller of the household walk, round to the driver's door of a vehicle standing unlocked in the rain, and look inside it. I did not know why that mattered. I only knew, the way you know a note is flat without being able to name it, that it was the strangest thing I had watched all morning. They sent Rooke home at 9. Home for him was 2 rooms above the saddlery in Marchbank Row, a bed, a chair, a shelf of his father's books, and a photograph of a funeral. I walked with him. I told myself I had to collect the yard keys off him, which was true and took 4 seconds and could have been done at the gate. Instead, I walked him out through the arch and down the wet length of Marchbank Row with my collar up, and neither of us said a word for 200 yards. Then he said, "You've seen that car go out at night?" "Yes." "How many times?" I did not answer, because the true answer was a number, and I had been carrying it about for 11 months like a stone in a boot. He never pushed. He simply left the silence where it was and let you fill it or not, which made him a great deal harder to live with than any man who shouts. At the corner he stopped. "Mr. Penhale, tell me the last time the Isolde bequest paid anybody." I opened my mouth. I closed it. The bequest was the fund the late Queen had endowed out of her own estate the year before she died, pensions for the widows of guardsmen killed on duty, schooling for their children, and the 12 almshouses out at Ashmere for the old ones. Every man in the household knew what it was. Not one of us could have told you the last time it gave anybody a penny. "Tobin Wren," said Rooke, "died on the Silver Court Gate 3 years ago in February. He went into the road after a man who ran at the barrier with something in his hand, and he took the man down, and the man's car came off the corner, and Wren didn't get up. You carried the front left of his coffin. I carried the back left. There is a photograph of it on my shelf. The rain was coming down the back of my neck. Nesta Wren applied to the bequest in the March, received, under consideration, and in the June she was told, and I've seen the letter, so I am quoting it, that the bequest had no funds presently available for new awards. She has been told the same thing every year since, in different words over a different signature. She works nights at the laundry on Colley Street. Her boy is 11. There is a fund of 9 million crowns, endowed in the name of a dead queen for exactly that woman and exactly that boy, and it has no funds presently available." He said it without heat. That is what I remember, a man telling you where the fire is, not shouting fire. "So this morning," he said, "there is a car in my gate with 2 cases in it, sealed with seals withdrawn from service 2 years ago, and it belongs to the woman whose son is chairman of the Harrowgate Heritage Society, and the Harrowgate Heritage Society has been drawing quarterly grants from the Isolde bequest since the year the Queen died, for the * conservation of household heritage. No, Mr. Penhale, I don't know what that means either. Nobody does. That's the point of it." "Halden, how long have you been?" 11 months, since Nesta got her 3rd letter and brought it to me because I'm a sergeant, and she thought a sergeant could go and ask." He almost smiled. "I asked the Comptroller's office in writing twice. I was told the bequest's accounts are private and my inquiry was noted." He put his hands in his coat pockets. He looked 31 and about 60. "I didn't call security this morning because of Nesta Wren," he said. "I want that understood because it will be said, and said as though it damns me. I called because 2 seals were out of series and a vehicle had no docket, and if that car had held nothing but tablecloths I would still have called, because I am not the man who decides which cars are worth the standing order." He looked up at me. "I called because of the book. Nesta Wren is only the reason I could stand there and do it and not be sick." Then he said good morning politely, and went up the stairs by the saddlery and shut his door. I have not told you about his father, and I must, because you will not understand the son otherwise. Gareth Rooke stood the palace gates for 26 years, and I served 4 of them beside him. One night in a winter I will not bother naming, a great man of that time came down to the west gate in a car with a case in the boot and no docket, and told him to open the barrier, and he opened it. That is all he did. He opened a barrier at 2 in the morning because a great man told him to, and because it was cold, and because he had a wife and a son of 4, and because that was the sort of person one did not ask. The case had come out of the muniment room. What was in it belonged to the nation. It went abroad. It has never come back. And a clerk of 31 named Aldous Vane, who had access to that room and no great man to protect him, was blamed and dismissed without a character, and spent 2 years in the courts, and did not survive the second of them in any sense that matters. Nobody ever charged Gareth Rooke. There was nothing to charge him with. He had done what he was told. He served 18 more years without so much as a smudge on his record, and when they retired him with a pension and a handshake, he walked to the end of Marchbank Row and stopped. And my wife, who saw it from the window, said he stood the better part of an hour in his coat with his cap in his hands before he went home. He is 76 now and lives at Ashmere 3 doors from the almshouses and cannot climb his own stairs. And the one thing he left his son, the only inheritance, apart from the books and the hands, he taught him at a kitchen table on Sundays over and over until the boy could say it back. The book is the only thing in this palace that cannot be flattered. It is not a fine saying. It is a piece of miserable, practical, hard-earned knowledge from a man who lifted a barrier once and paid for it every day for 40 years, and he hammered it into his son and hoped. So when people ask me, and they do ask still at dinners, with that awful bright curiosity, where did the sergeant find the nerve? I want to take them by the coat. Nerve is not found. Nerve is left to you across a kitchen table by a broken old man because it is all he has got, and you either take it or you don't. Halden Rooke took it. The car sat in the motor court all that day under a tarpaulin, on hold, with a security man beside it, because Dunn, who had lost his warrant card argument and his barrier argument and very nearly his job before 10 in the morning, had won exactly one thing, and he had won it by being too stubborn and too slow-witted to let go of it, which is a manner of winning I have a great deal of time for. The standing order says, a vehicle placed on hold shall be searched in full before release. In full. Quayle could not get round it, and he tried. He rang down 3 times before noon, the vehicle is Her Majesty's private property, the vehicle has been examined, the cases have been opened, the sergeant is stood down, there is nothing to search. And Dunn, being done, said, yes, my lord, and wrote each instruction in his own book with the time against it, and did nothing. I have wondered since whether Quayle even knew, whether he was covering for something he understood, or simply covering, the way a certain kind of man covers everything out of habit, because tidy is safe and open is not. I think he did not know. I think that is why he lived through what came next when the others did not. By 4 o'clock the pressure was telling. Word came down that the board of the household would sit in the morning, that the sergeant's case would be dealt with, that Her Majesty had been distressed, that the king, 3 weeks out of a heart procedure, under his physician's orders not to be troubled with matters of the yard, had not been troubled with matters of the yard, and that a release order would be signed at 5 over the Comptroller's name, and the Harlow would go out to Thornhallow before dark. At 4:20, with 40 minutes left, a car came in through the Queen's Gate that nobody had booked and nobody had expected, and stopped short of the barrier because there was a tarpaulin in its way. The Crown Prince got out of it, in a wet coat, with a 2-day beard, straight from the flooded lanes at Ashmere where he had spent 11 hours with a shovel and 100 farmers, and he stood in the middle of my motor court and looked at the shape under the tarpaulin, and he stopped walking. "Osric," said Rowan, "why is my mother's car standing in the rain with a policeman on it?" Rowan was 33 that autumn, his mother's height, his father's silences, and a way of standing very still while he decided things, which I always thought he had picked up from watching Gate soldiers when he was small and had nothing else to look at. He was not clever the way Cassius was clever. He was *slow, in the good sense. A man who arrives at the answer late and then cannot be shifted off it with a crowbar. And he had loved that car. A car is not a car when your mother is dead. Isolde had taught him to drive the Harlow on the Thornhallow lanes when his feet barely worked the pedals. She had driven him to school in it, and once, famously, to a funeral, because the state car had failed and she had said, "We shall go in the beast, and if anybody objects they can walk." When she died it went into a coach house for 4 years, and then it came out again and it was Morwenna's, because everything of Isolde's became Morwenna's by the slow, silent process by which such things happen. Nobody grants it. Nobody objects. It simply migrates. Rowan had not sat in that car in 9 years. He had walked past it 100 times in my yard and looked the other way, which is a thing men do and do not talk about. He took the corner of the tarpaulin in his fist and pulled, and the rain ran off it in a sheet onto his boots, and there she was. Mud green, 16 years old, dent in the near rear wing. "Right," he said, "tell me." So Dunn told him, flat, correct in order the way a superintendent reports the seals, the docket, the hold, the call, the cases, the linen, the papers, the controller, the warrant card, the release order at 5. No fact left out and no opinion offered, and when he had finished he stood there getting wet. "Say the sergeant's name again." "Rooke, sir, Lance Sergeant Halden Rooke." He called security. "On the Queen Consort, at the gate, in front of everybody, and then he handed you his card." "Yes, sir." Rowan looked at the car a while. There is not a man in this palace who would have done that. He glanced up, including me. Then he turned and looked at me, and my stomach went, because I had known him since he was 6, and he had never once looked at me like a man weighing a thing. "Osric, you have the movement book. How many times has that car left this palace in the last year?" And there it was. 19 years I had kept that book, tradesmen and horseboxes and laundry vans, and the king's own car, times and names and numbers in a hand that got worse every year. 19 years of a small hard pride I had never once said out loud, "Nothing goes out of my yard that isn't in my book." 11 months before, that had stopped being true. Cassius had come to me under the arch with his hands in his pockets and that easy way of his. The beast goes out to Thornhallow of an evening now and then. It's family, it's not a household movement, you needn't bother writing it. And I had said, "My lord, everything's written." And he had smiled and said, of course. And a fortnight later, a memorandum came down from Lord Quayle's office, on Comptroller's paper, stating that private family vehicles were exempt from the movement book by long-standing custom. I read it twice. I knew, standing there with it in my hand, that there was no such custom, and that if there had been, nobody would have needed to write it down. I put the memorandum in a drawer. And when the beast went out at night, 41 times in 11 months, I did not write it in my book. I was 63. I had a wife with a bad hip, a house that came with the post, and 11 months to my pension. Every time that car went out of my gate in the dark, I stood under my arch with the book under my arm and let it go, and told myself a memorandum is a memorandum, and hated the sound of my own name. I opened the book. My hands were not steady. "Sir," I said, "the book says the car has not left the palace at any time this year." "Good," said Rowan, "then it hasn't." "No, sir," I said. "The book is wrong." There was a silence in that motor court that I can still hear. "The book is wrong," I said again, because the first time it had come out of me too quietly to be worth anything, and I had spent 11 months being too quiet. That car has gone out of this yard 41 times since the winter, between 9 and midnight mostly, Cassius driving and sometimes Her Majesty in the back and twice Lady Verena. It goes out empty-looking and it comes back empty-looking, and I have never once looked in it, because I was told not to write it, and a man who is told not to write a thing understands that he is also being told not to look at it. I put the book down on the wing of the Harlow, in the rain, which is a thing I had never done to a book in my life. I counted them, I said. I didn't write them, but I counted them. 41. I could give you every date. I've had them in my head for 11 months, and I would like, if it's all the same to you, sir, to put them somewhere else. Nobody moved. Dunn said very carefully, Osric, why in God's name didn't you? Because a memorandum came from the Comptroller's office, I said, and I am a yard keeper, and I have a wife, and I am 11 months off my pension, and I am a coward superintendent, which is a much duller reason than any of the ones you were about to offer me. Rowan had not taken his eyes off the car. 41 times, he said. Yes, sir. Carrying what? I don't know, sir. That's the whole of my crime. I made certain I didn't know. And the Crown Prince said, in a voice I had not heard from him before and have not heard since, then we had better find out, hadn't we? Princess Adela came down at 10 to 5. She came because Rowan sent Pell running for her, and because she was the only person in that palace who could stand in front of Baron Quayle's release order and not be moved. The king's sister, 61, 40 years of opening bridges and inspecting regiments and being underestimated by clever men. She arrived in a green mackintosh with a scarf over her hair and looked at the Harlow, and then at the four of us standing round it like mourners. Well, she said, somebody has clearly had a day. Superintendent, is it true a sergeant of the guard telephoned security about the Queen Consort's car and gave up his warrant card before breakfast? It's true, ma'am. Then either he is the greatest fool in this household or he is the last honest man in it, and I should like to know which before I sign anything. She turned. The standing order, the exact words, superintendent, not the sense of it, the words. Dunn had them by heart by then. A vehicle placed on hold shall be searched in full before release, ma'am. And has it been searched in full? The cases have been opened, ma'am. The vehicle has not been searched. Why not? Dunn's mustache moved. Because the vehicle belongs to Her Majesty, ma'am, and I have been instructed 3 times to release it, and I have not released it, and at 5 o'clock a release order comes down over the Comptroller's signature, and I will have run out of ways to be slow. Adela looked at him a long moment. Superintendent, how many times in 22 years at this palace have you been slow on purpose? Once, ma'am, said Dunn, today. Then it is well overdue, and I shall stand it with you. She pulled her scarf tight. Search the car, now in front of witnesses before the order comes. If I am wrong, I shall apologize to Her Majesty in any terms she likes in front of the board. If I am right. She did not finish. She did not need to. Keys, said Dunn. And here is a thing so small it has never once been mentioned in any account of this business, and I have decided it matters more than most of the large things. The keys of the Harlow were on my board. They were on my board because at 6:40 that morning, in the rain, with his warrant card gone out of his breast pocket and his career in a superintendent's fist, Halden Rooke had walked to the driver's door of that car, taken the keys out of the ignition where Cassius had left them, carried them to the gatehouse board, hung them on hook 19, written *M 4412, held H. Rooke on the tag in pencil, and initialed it. A man who had just been destroyed, doing the paperwork. Cassius came down for those keys at 11, pleasant and unhurried, and asked me for them, and I take a small, mean, unworthy pleasure in this to my dying day, and I looked at hook 19 and said, My lord, the tag says the vehicle is held, and I cannot give you the keys off a held tag without the superintendent's countersignature. He stood there with his hand out. I stood there with my book. After a while he said something about my pension and went away. Rowan took the keys off the hook himself. He weighed them in his palm, a leather fob gone black with use, an old brass ring, and something went across his face that had nothing to do with schemes or seals or controllers. She used to keep these in her coat, he said, not on a hook, in her coat. It drove the household mad. Then he opened the driver's door of his mother's car and got in, and we began. We searched that Harlow for 55 minutes in the rain and the failing light, and we found nothing. I want to be honest about how bad it was. There is nothing in the world so hollow as 4 people taking a car apart in front of witnesses on the strength of a hunch and finding a car. The boot, a spare wheel, a jack, a blanket smelling of dog, a coil of rope, 1 green rubber boot. No pair. 1 boot, a woman's 9 years old. Under the seats, a pencil, 2 coins of a withdrawn currency, a hairpin, grit. The rear seat back lifted, springs and dust. The door pockets, a road atlas of the northern shires, a windscreen scraper, a tin of mints gone solid with age. The glove box, and this is where the story would have ended, and every man in that yard would have gone home, and Nesta Wren would still be working nights at the laundry on Colley Street. The glove box held a pair of leather driving gloves, a torch that did not work, a can of de-icer, a tire gauge, a folded map of the Thornhallow estate with a picnic spot ringed in pencil, and a paper bag of boiled sweets fused by 9 summers into a single amber stone. That was all. Rowan sat in the driver's seat with the door open and his knees out in the rain, holding a bag of dead sweets, and said nothing at all. The gatehouse clock said 7 minutes past 5. The release order had come down at 5 exactly. Dunn had it in his coat, unopened, and there was no longer any honest way not to open it. Quayle's clerk stood at the top of the steps with an umbrella, waiting to walk the car out himself. "Rowan," said Adela quietly, "I know. If it is nothing, then it is nothing, and we shall have made an enemy for life and lost a good superintendent and a better sergeant, and I will carry that, and so will you." "I know, Aunt." "Then get out of the car, my dear." And he was going to. He had his hand on the door frame and he was shifting his weight to stand, and I was 4 feet away and I saw it happen. I saw him stop. He had put his left hand down into the open glove box without thinking, to steady himself as he rose. And his fingers, going in deeper than a man's fingers should be able to go in a glove box that size, had come up against the back of it. He sat very still. He said in a strange, flat voice, "This isn't deep enough." "Sir," said Dunn. "It isn't deep enough." Rowan was not looking at any of us. He had gone somewhere behind his own eyes. Her spectacles. She kept her spectacles in here, and the money for the toll on the Ashmere Road, and it was deep asterisk. You could put your whole arm in it. When I was small, she used to hide things in the back of it and make me go in past the elbow to find them, and there was a... He stopped again. "There is a panel," he said. "A panel at the back and it slides." He turned round in the seat and knelt on it, facing backwards, and put his arm into the glove box up to the shoulder, and his face went hard and blank the way a man's does when he is feeling for something in the dark. We heard it. Every one of us heard it, over the rain on the tarpaulin and the idling of Quayle's clerk's shoes on the top step. A click, then a slide, then a long, dry, wooden sound like a drawer coming out of a table that has not been opened in years. And the Crown Prince of Eldermore said, very quietly, into the back of his dead mother's car, "Oh, you didn't." He came out of the car backwards, holding a bundle. Not a case, not a box. A bundle of loose paper, perhaps 2 inches thick, bound with 2 rubber bands crossed at right angles, slightly warped the way paper goes when it has lived somewhere warm and dry a long time. He stood up in the rain with it and did not shield it. That is what I noticed first, absurdly, that he did not put it under his coat. "Superintendent, come here. Aunt, Osric, Pell, you too. I want 4 people looking at this at the same time, and I want none of you standing behind me." We came. He slid the top rubber band off and turned the bundle so we could see the topmost sheet. It was the King's private letterhead. Heavy cream paper, the house arms blind embossed at the head, no printing, no crest in color. The plain private paper the king uses for his own hand, the kind that goes to old friends and to widows. There was nothing written on it. Nothing at all except at the foot, in the wide, tired, unmistakable hand that has been on every proclamation of my adult life. Alaric R**, signed, dated in his own writing, blank above it, a whole clean page of nothing with a king's signature at the bottom. Rowan turned it over. The second sheet was the same, and the third, and the fourth. "Count them," he said, and his voice had gone very level, and I understood that he was doing what Rooke had done at 6 in the morning, taking hold of the procedure with both hands, because the procedure is a rail, and there is a long way down. Dunn laid them out on the bonnet in the rain, one at a time, saying the number aloud each time, and Pell held his cap over them because nobody had told him to, and he could not think of anything else to do. 22. 22 sheets of the king's private paper, each signed at the foot, each dated across the last 11 months, each one utterly, screamingly empty above the signature. Adela had gone the color of the paper. He has been ill. Since the summer the physicians have him doing an hour at a time and no more. He has been signing in asterisk batches. She put her hand flat on the wing of the car. She sits with him while he does it. She has always sat with him. She holds the blotter. 22 blanks, said Dunn, sounding like a man reading his own sentence. Ma'am, with 22 of those a person could write anything above that signature. A warrant, an instruction to a bank, a deed. A deed, said Rowan. He was already going back into the car. The second thing out of the compartment was a telephone. Not the sort a Queen Consort carries, no leather case, no gold, a cheap gray plastic thing of the kind sold on Colley Street for the price of a hot dinner. It was switched off. It had been switched off, we learned later, every hour of its life except the 4 minutes at a time it was used. Rowan handed it to Dunn without a word, and Dunn took it in his handkerchief, and something in the way he did that told me the superintendent had stopped being a household officer at that second and become a policeman again. The third thing he brought out slowly, and he did not hand it to anybody. A letter, one sheet, folded in 3, in an envelope of a blue they do not make any more, and on the front of it in a fast, sloping, impatient hand. For Rowan, when he is old enough to be angry properly. "That's my mother's hand," he said. Nobody spoke. "The envelope has been opened and stuck down again. Look at the flap." We looked, the flap had been lifted. You could see the crazed line of the old gum, and the new gum under it, browner, shinier, later. "She's read it," said Rowan. He did not open it. I have thought about that a great deal, and it remains to me the most extraordinary thing anybody did that day, more extraordinary than the sergeant's telephone call, more extraordinary than an old fool of a yard-keeper finding his voice in a wet courtyard. The Crown Prince of Eldermore stood in the rain holding a letter written to him by his dead mother, which he had never seen, which somebody had stolen and read and hidden in a car for 9 years, and he did not open it. He gave it to Princess Adela. "Aunt, put that in your pocket and don't give it back to me until there are lawyers in the room. If I open it now, it's a letter. If I open it with witnesses, it's evidence." His jaw worked. "This is not going to be about me first. It is going to be about the 12 old men at Ashmere first. I can want it later." Adela took it. Her hands were shaking. "You are your mother's son," she said, "and I shall not forget that you said that." The clerk with the umbrella went up the steps very fast. The release order stayed in Dunn's coat, unopened, and was never opened, and it is in the court file to this day with its seal intact, which the prosecutor called the most eloquent unopened envelope he had met in 30 years at the bar. At 17 minutes to 6, the Queen Consort came back down to the motor court. She came alone, that is worth noting. Cassius was in the palace, and Cassius knew, because the clerk had run, and Cassius, being what he was, had gone straight to his own rooms and begun to burn things. which is the reason we know as much as we do, because a man who burns things in a hurry burns the wrong half. Moore went across those cobbles in the same coat she had worn at 6 that morning, as though the day had gone entirely as expected. She stopped at the front of the car and looked at the bonnet. 22 sheets of cream paper in 4 rows, dark with rain at the edges, the king's name at the foot of every one. She looked at them for perhaps 3 seconds, then she looked at her stepson. "Rowan, you have taken my property out of my car." "It isn't your car." "I beg your pardon." "It's my mother's car." He said it without heat, the way Rooke had said Nesta Wren's name. "You have driven it 5 years and never once put it in the book, and this morning a sergeant asked you for a docket and you told him there was no docket, there was only you." He lifted the nearest sheet by its corner. "What is this?" "That is the king's correspondence, and you have no business." "There is nothing on it." "No business whatever with the king's correspondence." "There is nothing on it, madam." He turned it to face her. "It is a blank page with my father's signature at the bottom, and there are 22 of them. There is a grocer's telephone in the back of that car that has never been on the household register. And there is a compartment behind the glove box that my mother fitted with a spring catch when I was 9 years old because she liked hiding sweets from the nursery, and you have been keeping the king's signature in it." Morwenna did not move. I have never seen anyone think so fast while standing so still. She was going through it, the yard, the witnesses, the ill king upstairs, the princess in the green mackintosh with something in her pocket, looking for the door. There were 4 of us and no door, and it took her about 2 seconds to find that out. And then she did the thing that finished her, though not one of us understood it at the time. "Those pages are for the bequest." "Silence." "The Isolde bequest." Her voice was perfectly steady, perfectly reasonable, a woman explaining an unglamorous necessity to people who have never had to sign anything in their lives. "His Majesty is a trustee. The trust requires his signature on its instruments, and he is Rowan. He can sign for 1 hour in the morning and then his hand fails. So he signs, the instruments are typed above, the bequest goes on functioning, and the widows go on being paid. It is dull, and it is necessary, and it is done in every great household in the realm. And if it offends your sense of ceremony, I am sorry. But the alternative is that nothing whatever gets done while the king is unwell." It was superb. I want to be fair to her, plausible, weary, faintly contemptuous, and it would have worked on 9 men in 10. Dunn looked for a moment uncertain. Adela's mouth opened. "And it was Guardsman Ivo Pell, 22 years old, 4 months on the Queen's Gate, standing there with his cap held over a row of wet papers, who said, 'Then why hasn't it paid anyone, ma'am?'" Everything stopped. Pell went scarlet to the ears. He did not look at her. He looked at the papers under his cap. "Beg pardon, ma'am. Only my sergeants had a letter off Mrs. Wren, whose husband died on the Silver Court gate, and the bequest wrote her there's no funds presently available. 3 times, ma'am, over 3 years. And there's 12 almshouses at Ashmere, and 8 of them are shut with the windows boarded, and my sergeant's father lives 3 doors from them, and—" He ran out of words. He stood there. "And if the widows go on being paid, ma'am," he finished, "who are they?" Morwenna looked at him. And in that look, for the first and only time, I saw what was actually inside her, and it was not wickedness in any grand sense. It was irritation. A guardsman of 22, a yard keeper of 63, a superintendent with a wet mustache and a crown prince holding a bag of ruined sweets had walked into 11 years of the most patient work of her life and pulled it apart in a courtyard, and what she felt was the irritation of a woman who has been interrupted. She turned and walked back into the palace. Nobody stopped her. There was nobody with the authority to stop her, and everybody in that yard knew it, and I remember Dunn's hand moving an inch towards her elbow and then stopping, because that is a hand a superintendent does not put out. She got as far as the arch. And under the arch, coming the other way, in a coat with his cap in his hand and no warrant card in his breast pocket, having walked back from Marchbank Row through the rain, because a guardsman he had trained had knocked on his door and said, "Sergeant, you'd best come," stood Halden Rooke. He stepped aside, of course he did. He came to attention against the stonework and let the Queen Consort of Eldermore pass, and he did not say one word to her, and he did not look at her, and she did not look at him. And that, in 19 years of watching that arch, is the most complete victory I have ever seen one human being hand another. The king was told at 8 that evening. I was not there. I have it from Adela, who told it to the board, and from Dr. Marrow, who stood behind the chair and is a truthful man made miserable by the truth. They did it in the long gallery, the only room in that wing with a table long enough. Alaric came in on Marrow's arm in a dressing gown and a scarf, 3 weeks out of the theater, gray as the weather, and sat down, and looked at 22 sheets of his own private paper laid end to end down that table with his name at the foot of every one. He looked a long time, then he said, "Where did you get these?" "Out of the back of Isolde's car," said Rowan. And the King of Eldermore put both hands flat on the table and bowed his head, and Marrow says he stayed like that the better part of a minute, and that nobody spoke, and that when he lifted his head his face had changed in a way that Marrow, his physician for 20 years, had never seen and did not care to see again. "She holds the blotter," Alaric said. "Yes, father. Every morning. She brings the folder and puts the sheet in front of me and holds the blotter and takes it away when I've done, because my hands—" He stopped. He turned his right hand over on the table and looked at it as if it belonged to somebody he was disappointed in. "I sign 20, 30 a morning. Warrants, letters, instruments. I have not read a page in 4 months, Rowan. I sign asterisk, and she says, 'That's the bequest, that's the almshouse award, that's the tenancy at Ashmere,' and I sign, and I am glad. Do you understand me? I am asterisk glad asterisk somebody is doing it because I cannot. Father, there is a sheet there dated the 9th of August. I remember the 9th of August, because I could not hold the pen, and she put her hand over mine and steadied it." He looked up the table at his son. "She steadied my hand while I signed a blank page." Nobody answered him. He straightened his back. He was 67, he had been king for 29 years, and he had about a quarter of his strength, and Marrow says he spent every scrap of it in the next 90 seconds. "Adela, sit down and take a note." "Alaric, sit down and take a note." She sat. 1. The board of the household does not sit tomorrow on any charge against a sergeant of the guard. It sits on the accounts of the Isolde bequest, with the civil authorities present, and with every instrument bearing my signature for 3 years on that table. 2. No transfer, payment, or instrument of the bequest is executed from this hour on any signature, including mine. 3. The Comptroller is relieved of his office tonight and will hold himself available to the board and to the police. 4. He stopped. He breathed. Marrow moved and the king put a hand up without looking at him. 4. That vehicle is not to be moved or cleaned or entered, and everything taken out of it is to be inventoried by the superintendent and the yard keeper together tonight and countersigned and written in the book asterisk. Rowan said, "And the 5th thing, father." "Yes," said the king. "The 5th thing." He looked down the long table at the 22 blank pages with his name at the bottom of each of them, and he said, "Bring me the sergeant." They fetched him out of the gatehouse, where he had sat 2 hours on a hard chair with his cap on his knees, refusing tea, because a man who has been stood down does not take tea from the men still on duty. He had no warrant card and no post, and strictly, no business being inside the wall at all. He was inside it because Pell had gone and got him and Dunn had looked the other way, and because there is a kind of order older than the standing orders. He came up the long gallery in his wet coat, boots marking 900 years of floor, and stopped at the regulation distance and came to attention. And the King of Eldermore looked at him down the length of a table covered in his own forged blank signature. Sergeant Rooke. Sir, you telephoned security about my wife's car. Yes, sir. Why? And Rooke and I would give a good deal to have seen this, and I have made Adela tell it to me 4 times, Rooke said. The seals were out of series, and there was no docket, sir. The king waited. Is that all? That's all, sir. That's the whole of it. You did not stop that car, said Alaric slowly, because you suspected the Queen Consort of a crime. No, sir, I didn't suspect Her Majesty of anything. I suspected the seal's asterisk. Rooke's eyes stayed on the wall behind the king's head, where they had been trained to stay. If I'd known what was in that car, I might not have had the nerve, sir, and I want to say that plainly. It is a great deal easier to stop a number in a book than to stop a queen, and a number in a book is all I ever stopped. The rest of it was the Crown Prince's doing, and the superintendent's and the princess's and Mr. Penhale's, and I was at home in my rooms while they did it. Adela says the king put his hand over his eyes. Marrow, how long have I got tonight? 20 minutes, sir, at the outside, and I shall be difficult about the 20. Then I shall use 8. The king lowered his hand. Sergeant, look at me. Rooke looked at him. There is a story in this household about your father, said Alaric. A great man told him to open a barrier, and he opened it, and a clerk named Aldys Vane went into the courts and did not come out. I have known that story since I was 30, and I have thought about that clerk perhaps once a year for 25 years, and I have never once done anything about him. Did your father tell it to you? Once, sir, and then he told me the other thing, which he told me a great many times. What other thing? And Halden Rooke, standing in a wet coat in the long gallery with no warrant card and no post, and his boots ruining the floor, said, that the book is the only thing in this palace that cannot be flattered, sir. The King of Eldermore sat with that a moment. No, he said, it can't. It only wanted somebody willing to be unliked long enough to write in it. He put his hand on the nearest of the 22 sheets. You have your card back tonight and your post back tomorrow, and I will hear no argument from any board about it. And, Sergeant, the 11 months of letters you wrote to the Comptroller's office about the bequest, that were noted and filed and answered with nothing. I want them. Bring them to the board in the morning. Sir, said Rooke, they're in a shoebox, sir. Then bring the shoebox, said the king. The board sat for 9 days. I will give you the 4 things that mattered, because they are the 4 things that took the Isolde bequest out of the hands that had it and put it back into the hands it was meant for. The first was the letter. They opened it on the second morning in the council room, with the king and Adela and Rowan present, and 2 lawyers, a magistrate and a clerk of the court. Rowan asked that the magistrate open it and read it aloud, because, and it is in the transcript, I have not read it. I would rather hear it the way everyone else hears it once. It was short. Isolde had written it in the September before she died, when she knew. She wrote to her son that he was 14 and would be angry with her for dying, and that he was entitled to be. She wrote that she had put her own money, all of it, into a trust for the families of the men on the gates, because, and I quote her, because it went round the realm and has not stopped going round. They stand between us and the weather, and we thank them by not looking at them. And I have been guilty of that for 20 years, and I am ashamed. And then the sentence that broke it open. I have had the deed copied and certified, and the certified copy is lodged with the almoner at Ashmere and not in this house, because this house loses things it does not wish to find, and because a trust that lives in only one drawer is not a trust, it is a hope. The magistrate stopped reading. Somebody had to be sent out of the room to be quiet in the corridor. Adela says it was not Rowan. They sent a car to Ashmere that afternoon. The almoner was a woman of 71 named Tamsin Ord, who ran the 12 almshouses, 8 boarded, for cold, and who had been writing to the Comptroller's office for 6 years and getting her inquiries noted. She took the magistrate into the back room of the parish office, got a Japan tin box down off a cupboard with a step stool, blew the dust off it, and opened it. There it was, the deed of the Isolde bequest, certified, sealed, dated, signed by Queen Isolde 11 months before her death. It named 3 trustees, the king, the almoner of Ashmere, and the surging tatarms of the guard. It did not name the controller of the household. It did not name the Queen Consort. And it carried a clause, in Isolde's own drafting, that no trustee might be added or removed except by an instrument signed by all 3. The deed that had been operating inside the palace for 9 years, the one in the Comptroller's strong room, the one every award and transfer had been made under, named 4 trustees. The 4th was Her Majesty the Queen Consort. It was dated 3 months after Isolde's funeral, and it bore Alaric's signature at the foot of a page he had never read. The older of the 2 lawyers, a dry man of about 80, held the 2 deeds side by side up to the window for a long time. "Well," he said, "there it is. Somebody typed a trust over a dead woman's grave." The second thing was the telephone. It had 1 number in it, saved under 3 letters HHS and 11 months of messages, and the messages were the dullest reading in the world, which is what made them so complete. Dates, amounts, cleared, held over to the quarter. Second tranche moved, will need another sheet. And on a night the previous March at 11 minutes past 10, from HHS to the gray plastic telephone in the back of a glove box. "Wren woman has written to the guard now. Sergeant asking questions. Advise." And the reply, sent from that telephone 8 minutes later. "Answer nothing, note and file. She has no standing and he has no rank." Dunn read that one out to the board himself, and then he put the paper down and stood there. And I have known Marek Dunn 22 years, and I did not know his face could do that. She has no standing and he has no rank. They put that sentence on the front of every newspaper in the realm, and then somebody painted it on a gable end at the top of Colley Street, where it remains. Nesta Wren walks past it to get to work. She says she has got used to it. I do not believe her. The third thing was the Harrowgate Heritage Society. Fine name, fine address, 1 chairman, and the chairman was Lord Cassius. Over 9 years it had drawn from the Isolde bequest, in quarterly grants for the conservation of household heritage, a sum the board's accountant read out in a flat voice on the 6th morning, and then had to read out again, because nobody had believed him the first time. 9,400,000 crowns. The entire endowment, every penny Isolde had put in, and the interest, and then the capital drained in careful quarterly bites by a society that had conserved, so far as anyone could establish, 1 wall clock, which stood in Cassius's drawing room at Thornhollow, bought at auction with a check drawn on the society's account. And the 4th thing was the sheets. The accountant matched 3 instruments executed that spring and showed the board how the typing sat on the page, the body text set too high, the margins wrong for the household's own machines, the last line crowding the signature because whoever typed it had been guessing where the pen had gone. He put them under glass and let them look, one by one. There is nothing on earth so quietly damning as a margin. On the 9th day the board reported to the king, and the king, who had spent 9 days sitting in a chair he had been ordered not to sit in, took the report in both hands, read the first page, and closed it. "Adela, you will take this to the courts, not the household courts, the king's bench. Ours have failed." "Alaric, the newspapers." "Let them print it," said the king. "All of it. Let them print my name at the bottom of 22 empty pages, and let every man in this realm see what an old fool signs when he is frightened of his own hands." They came for Cassius at 4 in the morning on the Ashmere Road. He was driving out with a leather bag and 2 suitcases, having spent 11 hours burning papers in his own grate, and the police had been sitting in an unlit car at the bottom of the Thornhollow Lane for 6 of them, because Chief Superintendent Marek Dunn, the slow man, the man who was slow once on purpose on a Thursday, had gone straight to the civil authorities on the evening of the search, and had not told one soul inside the palace that he had done it. The bag had the society's ledgers in it. He had not burned those. He could not, because a second set of books existed in an office in the city, and the ledgers were the only thing that would let him argue about which set was true. So he took them, and he was found with them on a wet road at 4 in the morning, and every accountant in the realm agreed afterwards that he would have been better off with an empty bag. Lord Baron Quayle was not arrested that night, or any night. The finding of the court was that Quayle had not stolen a penny, and had not forged a line, and had not known what was in the back of a car. That he had spent 11 years building the smooth, closed, unquestionable machine inside which somebody else did all of it, and had never once opened a door he was not obliged to open, and had answered every inquiry in the realm with the word asterisk noted asterisk. They stripped him of his office and his pension, referred him for willful neglect, fined him, and let him walk out a free man into a life in which nobody would take his call. Rowan said afterwards that he thought that was worse. I said, no, sir, it's just quieter. And in the spring, the Queen Consort Morwenna went before the King's bench on charges of forgery, of fraud upon a charitable trust, of concealing a private letter, and of procuring the King's signature by deceit. She pleaded not guilty to all of it, and she was defended by the finest advocate money could buy, and she sat through 19 days with her chin up and her gloves in her lap. She was very good. I sat in that court 11 days of the 19, and I will not pretend otherwise, cool, courteous, devastating with 2 of the household witnesses. There was an afternoon in the second week when I honestly believed she would walk out of that building. And then they called the sergeant. They had him in the box 2 hours and 10 minutes, and for the first 40 of them her advocate did nothing but be kind to him. That is how the good ones do it. He asked about Rooke's service and his father, and gently about Tobin Wren, and carrying the back left of the coffin, and Nesta Wren on Colley Street, and the 3 letters that said no funds presently available. He let Rooke answer it all in that flat closing door voice, and the jury listened, and I sat in the gallery thinking, what are you doing? You are building him up. And then the advocate said, very softly, Sergeant Rooke, you hate my client, don't you? No, sir, said Rooke. You have every reason to. She is, to your mind, the woman who took the money that should have gone to your friend's widow. You have written to her Comptroller's office for 11 months and been fobbed off. You have carried a coffin. You have watched a laundry take a woman's nights. And then one wet morning a chance came to you, in the shape of 2 seals that did not match a number in a book, and you took it, and you dressed it up in procedure, and you telephoned security on the Queen Consort of this realm. And you would have telephoned security on her that morning, would you not, whatever had been in those cases? Yes, sir, said Rooke. Her advocate had his next question half out of his mouth. He got it back in again, but I saw it happen. Yes. Yes, sir, I would have. That is what the standing order is for. Rooke put his hands on the rail of the box. Sir, you have asked me a question I have been asking myself since February, so I'll give you the whole answer, and you may do what you like with it. If those cases had held tablecloths and nothing else, and for 11 hours, sir, that is what everybody in that palace believed they held, including me, then I had ruined my life over 2 numbers in a book, and I'd have gone home to 2 rooms over a saddlery and a father who can't climb his stairs, and I'd have had to sit with that. I had made my peace with it before I ever picked up the telephone. That is the only part of this I am proud of, and I am not very proud of it because it isn't much. You have said I took a chance. I'd like to put it another way, and then I'll stop. There is a book in the motor court of that palace, and every wheel that goes in or out is written in it, and it has been so a very long time. It is not a clever thing. Any man in this room could keep it. It cannot tell a queen from a coal merchant, and it does not know what a title is, and that is the entire point of it. A book is a asterisk level asterisk thing, sir. It only asks what you are carrying and where you are taking it, and whether you will put your name to that. 9 years ago, somebody in that household worked out that if the book never asked the question, nobody would ever have to answer it. So the car stopped being written down. And once a thing stops being written down, it stops being asterisk looked at, and once it stops being looked at, you can keep anything in it you like. You can keep a king's signature in it, on 22 blank pages in the dark, behind a spring catch, a dead woman fitted for sweets. I didn't take a chance that morning. I asked the question the book asks, and she would not answer it. He looked at the advocate steadily. That's all I did, sir. I've thought about it for a year, and I can't make it into anything grander, and I have stopped trying. The advocate sat down. They asked her in the afternoon why she had never once put that car in the movement book. She said the book did not apply to private family vehicles. They asked her to produce the custom. She said it was long-standing. They asked her again to produce the custom, and there was a pause that lasted, by my watch, 11 seconds. 11 seconds is a very long time in a courtroom. They called me on the 14th day, and I had not slept. Mr. Penhale, does the movement book record any journey by the vehicle M4412 in the last 5 years? No, sir, none at all. And did that vehicle in fact make such journeys? Yes, sir. I watched it go 41 times in 11 months and a great many times before that, and I never wrote a single one of them down. Because a memorandum came from the Comptroller's office, and I was afraid, and I was near my pension, and I told myself a memorandum was a memorandum. You are aware that this court may take a view of that? Yes, sir, I said. I hope it does. A sergeant of the guard picked up a telephone at 6 in the morning with everything to lose and nothing to gain, and he did in 11 seconds what I hadn't the guts to do in 11 months, and I had the asterisk book under my arm the entire time. I had to stop. So I'd rather the court took a view, sir. They did not prosecute me. I have never entirely forgiven them for that either. The jury were out 6 hours. They convicted her on the forgery, on the fraud upon the trust, on the procuring of the king's signature by deceit, on the count of concealing a private letter written by a dying woman to her son. They convicted her in 4 minutes, and the foreman, when he gave that one, looked at her, which they are not supposed to do. She stood up to hear it, and she stood up to leave. Whatever else is said of her, she never once bent her back in that room. Cassius got 11 years, she got 9. The king, by his own instrument, removed her from every office, patronage, and precedence in the realm, revoked the styles granted at her marriage, and directed that her name be struck from the roll of the Isolde bequest and never restored. And then he did the thing nobody asked for, which I think about more than any of the rest of it. He had the 22 blank pages bound, every empty sheet with his own name at the foot of it, sewn into a plain black board cover with the date on the spine, and lodged in the muniment room beside the deed of the Isolde bequest, with an instruction in his hand that it is to be shown to every king of Eldermore on the day of his accession, and to every controller of the household on the day of his appointment, and that it is never to be explained to them. Let them work out what it is, he said. It will take them about 4 seconds, and they will remember it for the rest of their lives. Here is what happened to the rest of us, and then I have done. The Isolde bequest was restored out of the forfeited estates, and it came back richer than it had ever been, because the courts took Thornhallow and the society's holdings and the wall clock, and gave the lot to 12 almshouses and the widows of the gates. Tamsin Ord was confirmed as trustee, and the first thing she did was take the boards off 8 windows herself, with a claw hammer, in front of a photographer at the age of 71, and she would not let anybody help her. Nesta Wren was paid 3 years of arrears, her pension, the schooling for her boy, and with it a letter in the king's own hand, typed above by nobody, which took him, Marrow says, 40 minutes to write, because of what his hands were doing. She kept the laundry job 8 months more and then she stopped. She is a governor of the almshouses now, and a great deal fiercer about the accounts than anybody expected. Guardsman Ivo Pell, who asked a Queen Consort a question in a wet courtyard at 22, with his cap held over a row of forged pages, is a sergeant on that same gate now, and a better one than he thinks, and he has never once mentioned that day to me. Chief Superintendent Marek Dunn retired at the end of the following year and was made a companion of the Order of the Realm for it, and at the dinner he stood up and said 11 words, "I was slow on purpose once. I recommend it, thank you," and sat down. Halden Rooke had his warrant card back that same night out of the king's own hand, and his post back the next morning. He stood the Queen's Gate 6 more years, and then he took over the training of the gate detachments, which is where he is now and where he will be until they carry him out. They offered him a commission twice. He turned it down twice. He tells rooms full of 19-year-olds that an officer's job is to decide things and a gate soldier's job is to ask the question, and that he has not finished asking it. They rewrote the standing order that year. It is shorter than it was. It reads in its entirety. Every wheel that passes this gate is entered in the book. Every case that leaves this house is sealed and its number written. No vehicle, no person, and no name is exempt. If the answer is not given, the movement does not happen. The men call it Rooke's order. Nobody in authority has ever called it that, and nobody in authority has tried very hard to stop them. His father lived 4 more years, and he got to see it. On the morning the newspapers carried the verdict, 3 doors up from the almshouses at Ashmere, Gareth Rooke sat in a chair by a window with a paper on his knees for most of a day, and said nothing to anybody, and would not have his tea. And me. I went back to the motor court on the Monday after the verdict, got out the movement book, turned to the first blank page at the back, and ruled it up in my own hand. Then I wrote the 41 entries, every one. Date, hour, vehicle, driver, destination, cargo, unknown, not inspected, and in the last column where the keeper's initials go, I put mine 41 times, and against each one the words entered late, by O. Penhale keeper, who saw it and did not write it. It took me the better part of 5 hours, and I had to stop twice. My handwriting is very bad by the end, and I have not corrected it. Then I closed the book and carried it up to the Comptroller's office. There was a new Comptroller by then, a small, dry woman from the Treasury who had asked more questions in 6 weeks than her predecessor asked in 11 years, and I put it on her desk with my resignation on top of it, and I said, "Ma'am, the last 41 entries are mine, and they are late, and you will want to read them before you decide whether to accept this." She read them. It took her a long time. Then she said, "Mr. Penhale, if I accept this, who keeps the book?" "Somebody who will write in it, ma'am." She did not accept it. She made me stay 2 more years and train the woman who has it now, and she said, and I have never worked out whether it was a kindness or the coldest thing anybody has said to me, "You are the only man in this household I am now completely certain will never do it again." So I kept the book 2 more years, and every morning of them my eye went, whether I wanted it to or not, to the ruled-up page at the back with 41 late entries on it in bad handwriting. That is the whole of it. People want a bigger ending. They come to my door with recorders and notebooks, and they want to know what she said at the last, and whether the king wept. I tell them what I have told you, and they go away disappointed, because what they wanted was a palace and what I have given them is a book. But I will tell you the picture I keep, and then you can go. It is not the courtroom, and it is not the 22 pages on a wet bonnet, and it is not the boards coming off the almshouse windows. It is 6:40 in the morning at the Queen's Gate in the rain, and a man who has just lost everything he has is walking to the driver's door of the car that destroyed him. He takes out the keys. He carries them across the yard. He hangs them on hook 19, and he takes a pencil out of his tunic, a stub of a pencil chewed at the end, the way every gate soldier's pencil is chewed, and he writes on the tag in the rain so it can be read by whoever comes next. M4412, held H. Rooke. And then he initials it. That is what it looks like when a man stands his post. Not a shout, not a fist, not a rifle. A stub of pencil in the rain and a name on a tag and a Queen's car going nowhere at all. Write it down, whatever it is, whoever it belongs to. Write it down.